Hi guys! So I know there's a lot of you out there who maybe know how to code, maybe only a little bit, maybe not at all, and you just want to learn how to make a game. You just want to get started, get something that you understand and can play around with and have fun with. So I thought for the next few videos and for the next few weeks, we could make a Unity game together. So I haven't actually planned anything out, but I thought I could show you the actual process when I start making something because I feel like tutorials are too well executed. It makes you feel by the end like, how could I have thought of that? So I want to show you how you can think through problems even if you have minimal experience. So first, we'll start by making a visual novel and later adapting that to a point and click adventure, which is a great starting point. If you have art and story, that's a game that you could market right now. But before we start a project like this, it's important to plan well, give yourself small, manageable goals, and hold yourself to it. I think one of the biggest problems is that people have commitment, but they don't know how to break down a huge problem into small steps that they can do. All right, so if we're going to make a visual novel, what are some components we need to get from the beginning to the end of at least one scene? So, all games, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that all games have some kind of menu. Uh, it might have a play button or options, but it has a menu. For this type of game, maybe we'd have some kind of scene select so that you could replay certain parts. We'll just include that in our game. And then the most important is the actual content. So let's just call this scene 1. Okay, so what do we need to make each of these big components happen? So let's just keep breaking it down. So the menu would definitely need some kind of play button. Play, we could also have maybe options like load, make an account, something like that. But let's just do play. And then we'll also have a button to our scene select. So we'll just put this here and we'll know that it's a button. Now the scene select, we're going to break it down how to implement it. I think we need some kind of scrolling panel or scrollable panel. And then just buttons or images to get to the next level. So I'll say buttons for now. We could figure out how to implement it later. And we'll just say they go to a scene. Now this is probably the most complicated because it's the actual game, right? So let's think about what's in a visual novel. Usually you have a character in the forefront of the screen and they talk with some text box. Maybe their name is here and they talk down here. So what are some things about this scene that we need to implement? Well, first, obviously, the character. So we'll come back to the details of this. But then what's the next component? We need a text box. Something else that might be important is maybe we have a button up here to pause or go home. So let's just say pause button. And then let's break this down. So let's start with the text box. The text box should probably have a way to continue the dialogue. So let's say we start with click to continue. But I know many visual novels, you can go backwards and forwards if you wanted to reread things. So let's say we have back and forth buttons. I'll just use arrows. Back and forth buttons. And then it obviously has dialogue and a name of the character who's talking. So I think this is pretty much all the components of our text box. But then what about our character? So there's usually more than one character, and sometimes they might be talking to each other, or sometimes someone is in the foreground while someone is in the background, like back here. Or sometimes if one character is talking, they appear, the other one disappears, and they just only have one character at a time. For our purposes, we will just have one character at a time. So what do we need? Well, they need to have a name too. And what else? They need to have poses. if you've ever played Phoenix Wright or any of those other games, you'll know that the characters aren't static. They have different facial expressions, different animations, so we could store some poses. What else? So depending on how we want to implement this, the dialogue could be stored in the character, or, so I'm going to skip this because I just got an idea. Another component should be I'll call it cutscene. I'll just call it a cutscene system. So we need something that stores what characters say things when. So it's essentially our script. And this is what we'll read. This is what will interact with the text box and the character. So maybe this is what we were looking for. Script will interact with this, and it'll interact with this to tell the character what pose to do if the character is appearing, and it'll tell the text box what text to display upon going back and forth. So when I'm thinking about how to implement the script or the cutscene system, I imagine a bunch of text files for each level. So in these text files, one line, so we have many lines in these text files, one line would be a text box full of dialogue. So let's say we have the name of the character, comma, their pose, so we know what animation or facial expression to display, and then a string of dialogue. And then each line, so it would know that it's a new line from this /n, which means new line in pretty much every coding language. And then you'd have another name, and so on. And so the way this would work is, let's say you have character A. Okay, this is A. It's kind of creepy if you think about it. Anyway, let's say they have multiple text boxes. So what would happen is we would say A has happy pose. Let's say this is a happy pose, and they have dialogue that looks like this. Now if they have to keep talking, we'd say person A, same pose, happy pose, and then we'd have the next line of dialogue. So we would tell it every time we press the next button, go to the next line. Every time we press the next button, go to this /n special character, and then start parsing from there till we hit another /n. Is basically what the system is doing. And then similarly, backwards just means go to this one and start parsing from this line. So I think this is a decent system because we could have a text file. We could just call it scene 1, and this would just store everything the characters say. We could also extend this because later on we want to add choices. So in here we could say choice A, B, and then we can come up with another system to add on to this that remembers which choice you chose. And then it'll look up which choice you chose and then which dialogue to give you based on those choices. So we can talk about that later, but this looks like it will cover what we need to get our very first scene completed. As I said before, I'm totally making this up as I go along, but I hope seeing my thought process can help you think through things. So in the next video, we're going to start by making our menus so that we can learn to navigate Unity and figure out how to use all of its tools. Then we're going to just jump right in by making our script and cutscene system. And I think you'll be surprised how easy this comes after just making a simple plan. And remember, I'm doing all of this impromptu, including the coding. So I want to show you how to go through the debugging process and what happens when your plan doesn't work. How do you adapt and be agile with your project? So if this is exciting or helpful to you in any way, please leave me a comment giving me any feedback or ideas. I do these videos because I love making games, and it's awesome to know that other people are learning from what I have to say. So look forward to the next episode. I'll see you next time.